Hello, everyone. Welcome to Optimize Nutrition While Reducing Food Waste. I'm Trisha Silverman. Welcome on behalf of Point 32 Health, Tufts, and Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. I'm a dietitian and a life and wellness coach and a fitness instructor, and I love to help people with their health and wellness. As we move along, feel free to put your questions in the chat. I will look at those as we move along and then get to some of them at the end. And let's go ahead and move. So it's important to know that 1/3 of all food produced is wasted. So the USDA says that in the US, over 1/3 of all available food goes uneaten through loss or waste. And 31% of food loss is at the consumer or retail level. So we are all throwing away a lot of food. We want to prevent that from happening to save money, to help the environment, to help people that are facing food insecurity. And we'll get into all that as we move along today. The first thing that's really important is we want to eat healthy food. And I posed a question in the chat, and that was, what is the food you find you're throwing away the most? And people often say, well, I end up throwing away my fruits and vegetables, so I don't buy them and I don't eat them. And we want to move away from that. We want to have a better plan for eating our fruits and vegetables so that they don't go bad. We eat them before they go bad. We buy just enough of what we need. And we want to try to get around half of our plate vegetables. We want lots of color. You see the rainbow behind me. So we want to eat a rainbow array of fruits and vegetables. A quarter of our plate protein-rich foods like beans and fish, chicken, turkey, eggs, nuts, and seeds. We want to limit the red meat in our diet. And that means pork, beef, and lamb. And also, dairy is a protein-rich food. And one great item that has a nice amount of protein is Greek yogurt. So that's a nice way to help get in some additional protein. A quarter of our plate carb-rich foods. We don't have to eliminate carb-rich foods, even if you're looking for weight management. It's really portions that matter. And that's our whole grains in that category. So brown rice and millet and oatmeal and quinoa, and your starchy vegetables like sweet potato and peas and corn. And then we want to get fruit in daily. Around 3 servings a day would be great. And I'm not asking you to eat a ton. So half cup servings, small to medium piece. Try to get different varieties, different colors in. And then in the bottom left, you see healthy fats. So things like avocados and extra virgin olive oil. And we'll be sharing more about this as we move along and look at dates on packages. But you want to be getting in some healthy fat. Your nuts and seeds are nutrition powerhouses, things like flaxseed and chia seed and hemp seed and sunflower seeds, all so good for us, and all kinds of nuts, really super good for us. And we'll talk more about those as we move along today as well. So the first thing that's important to know about are the dates that are on your food. So there are things called open dating, and that's the best by or used by dates, and then closed dating, which is the date of production. So there should be a phrase next to the date, such as best if used by. Except for infant formula, dates are not an indicator of the product's safety and are not required by federal law. Now, these are quality dates, not necessarily safety dates. So, whoops, excuse me, the best if used by or before date indicates the best flavor or quality. It's still safe after that date. And the sell by date tells the store how long to display the product for sale for inventory management. It's not a safety date. The use by date is the last date recommended for the use of the product while at peak quality. It's not a safety date except for infant formula. Voluntary labels by companies suggest throwing it out after this date. And then a freeze by date indicates when a product should be frozen to maintain peak quality. It's not a purchase or safety date. And I am going to stop sharing and just let me spotlight myself for a moment. And just give me a second here so you can see. Ah, there we go. All right, let me show you some extra virgin olive oil. When you look at the date on the back, the harvest date, October through December 2023, used by February 2026. In general, it's good to use up an olive oil 2 years from the harvest date. We're going to talk more about oil once you open it. We'll get to that in just a little bit. I wanted to show you the closed dating versus open dating. So here are canned beans, and they have closed dating. That's the date of production on there. It doesn't say best if used by, there's just a date. And that's the 22nd of October, 2024 is when this was produced. Now, when we look at the bottom, has the same, when it was made, when it was produced. And now let's look at a different can, and you'll see the best if used by date, January of 2028. So look at the language. If it doesn't say best by, then that date may be the date of production. On eggs, there's a 3-digit code, and that code is the date from the start of the year when that food was made. So if the date is 003, then those eggs were made, they came from the chicken on the 3rd of January, and they go throughout the year, which is really cool. All right, let me start sharing again, and just give me a moment here, and get back to, there we go. Okay, all right, let's move along and talk about again infant formula. That's the exception to the rule. So with the exception for infant formula, if the date passes during home storage, a product should be safe and wholesome if handled properly until time the spoilage is evident. How do we know? The smell, the flavor or texture, and then if it's slimy. So the change in color alone doesn't mean it's spoiled. Color changes are normal for fresh meats, but with spoilage, there can be a change in color, often a fading or darkening. So we need to pay attention. If it did change color, then look for the under indicators: odor, that slimy texture, and a flavor change. But before you taste it, look at it, smell it, see if it's slimy. And, the last thing would be a flavor. But if it doesn't taste good, we don't want to eat that. And then again, infant formula is one of those things with, when that date comes, after that, it should not be given to infants. So that's the only exception to all these date rules, that the date for infant formula, very important, and don't go beyond that. Okay, USDA says when food is tossed aside, so too are opportunities for improved food security, economic growth, and environmental prosperity. Now, let's talk about our protein sources and when, how long are they good for? When should we use them by? So in general, we want to cook or freeze fresh poultry, fish, ground meats, and meat with internal organs within 2 days of purchase. So cook it or freeze it within 2 days. Other beef, veal, lamb, or pork within 3 to 5 days. When you cook chicken, turkey, beef, the leftovers are good for 3 to 4 days. Now, the rules used to be 3 days, but USDA in the last few years now says 3 to 4. The 4th day is questionable. Again, that's when you're going to look for, all right, how does it look? Is it slimy? Does it smell? Use your senses. And then the last thing would be, if you tasted it and it wasn't good, then, no good. But in general, 3 to 4 days are when your leftovers are good. Now, we want to wash fruits and veggies, but not meat, poultry, or eggs, because we don't want to spread the bacteria throughout your kitchen. So you want to cut away any damaged or bruised areas, then rinse your fruits and vegetables under running water without soap, bleach, or commercial produce washes. We don't need those washes. And then scrub firm produce like melons or cucumbers with a clean produce brush. And then you can dry your fruits and veggies with a paper towel or clean cloth towel, or I prefer to just put them on a plate and let them dry naturally. Don't wash meat, poultry, eggs, or bagged produce marked pre-washed. And the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency says that food waste is the single most common material landfilled and incinerated in the U.S., comprising 24% and 22% of landfilled and combusted municipal solid waste, respectively. You may have noticed in your town that they're now collecting food waste. So there are efforts to help with this endeavor so that we're not having to put them in a landfill or burn them up. Now, we don't want to store eggs on the fridge door. That can make them go bad more quickly. Why? Because the temperature difference, when you swing that door open, it's exposed to higher temperatures. And we want our food to stay cold, 40 degrees or less in the fridge. Now, fruits and vegetables are the most commonly wasted foods, followed by dairy and eggs. And that's why I asked that question in the chat earlier. What type of food do you find you're throwing away the most? And it's often I see the answer is the fruits and vegetables, but we again don't want to use that as a reason not to eat them. We just want to plan for them better. Now, I thought this would be interesting for you to see. So, this is greenhouse gases that get emitted. And the problem is, we're producing a lot of food that never ends up being eaten. And when we produce that food, we're using land and other resources, fertilizer, pesticides. And that is leading to a large amount of greenhouse gases that damage the ozone layer. So if we think about ways, and it's really something that has to be done, we can do it in our homes and save money by reducing our food waste. But we need to do things nationally and globally to really help so that we're not producing too much that we just don't need in the end. The U.S. Protection Agency says that the consumption stage, which is restaurants and households, is responsible for roughly half of U.S. food loss and waste. So it's really restaurants and then what we're doing at home. Now, I have volunteered at the Revere Food Pantry. And the great thing there is that I saw that restaurants and grocery stores would bring some of their food, some of their breads over to the pantry to be given out so that they don't get wasted. Now, while food is abundant in the US, food insecurity persists. Food insecurity is the condition of not having access to sufficient food or food of adequate quality to meet your basic needs. So in 2019, more than 35 million Americans were food insecure. Isn't that hard to believe? It's really sad. Now, US food insecurity is not driven by scarcity. So it's not like we're having famine that we can't grow the food. We have too much surplus food, but it's not getting distributed in the way that we need it to get distributed. So the amount of surplus food from retailers and consumers is sufficient to feed 154 million people for a year. And we have 35 million people in our country that need this food, but they're not getting access to it. Now, it's not always possible or appropriate to redistribute surplus food. The US goal is to have food waste by 2030. And solutions must include efforts to prevent the generation of too much food. So, that picture I showed you earlier, we're just making too much food. And then we also want to prevent food loss and waste, in the home and at restaurants. And we want to increase efforts to redistribute safe surplus food when and where possible. So I thought this was interesting to show you. So at the top, you see food available to Americans. We're consuming, you see that area in white, and look at all the surplus food. So of the surplus food, we have enough to feed all of our Americans, but yet it's not getting to them. And then the remaining is the food waste. So it's pretty shocking when you look at it in a diagram like this. And this is globally. So China has a lot of food loss and waste. We are the third country with the most food loss and waste. But here's the interesting thing. Look to the left. So the US makes up about 5% of the global population. However, we are contributing 10% to food loss, to overall food loss and food waste. So we have to make some changes, and they can start in the home. And the way that I'm going to explain how to think about your shopping and think about how much food you keep in the home can help you to save money at home and save time and really save on the food waste. So let's chat about herbs and spices. So herbs are the leaves of a plant and spices are the roots, bark, and the seeds. Things like vanilla extract and that is pretty much it'll last indefinitely except if it develops a bad odor. And then salt can last indefinitely. Other extracts you'll get a fading in 2 to 3 years. Whole spices, unground, such as peppercorns, whole allspice and caraway seeds and more, you'll get about 3 to 4 years. Ground spices like cumin, ginger, paprika, and chili powder, 2 to 3 years. Ground and whole leafy herbs like basil, oregano, rosemary, and most seasoning blends, about 1 to 3 years on those. The USDA says on average, households could save about $370 per person annually if they reduced food waste. Imagine what a family of four could do with an extra $1,500 a year. And I see food waste. I've seen it. I remember going on an open house tour to look at a home years ago. And when we walked into the home, the cabinets were bursting with all this food. And I thought it was interesting when I walked down into the basement, looked to the left and to the right, there was shelves with all this food. And then you turned around the corner and more shelves of food. And that food is just not going to last. A family of four is not going to be able to go through all that food. So, although you may save money up front if you stock up a lot, if you don't use the food, it's going to end up being thrown out. And it loses nutritional quality over time, too. So, we want to think about not keeping so much on hand. Having some storm food available is good for that random hurricane or storm that may come up. But then beyond that, we don't want to keep too much on our shelves because then if we throw it away, not only is it food waste, but it's money waste as well. All right, let's talk about produce that lasts long. So, apples, keep them in your fridge. They can last up to 2 months. Beets up to 3 months in your fridge crisper drawer. Cabbage up to 2 months in the fridge crisper drawer. Citrus up to 2 months loose in the fridge crisper. Um, Onions several weeks in cool, dry, dark area, and whole bulbs of garlic up to 6 months in a cool, dry area. So knowing that apples will last a long time, citrus, if we go food shopping, we can plan those for the end of the week. Things that go bad quickly, like the berries, strawberries, blueberries, plan in your menu, and I'm going to show you a menu I have, and you'll have access. I'm going to pass these resources, the handouts and the menu and a customizable shopping list. You can get access to those and you can plan in your menu that the berries in the beginning of the week, the apples and the oranges toward the end of the week. This way, things don't go bad. If you find that you're just not going to go through all the grapes that you purchased, all the blueberries, strawberries, you can rinse them well, drain them off, and then freeze them. Then you can have them as snacks or put them in smoothies. Grapes are great as just a nice snack in the summertime, frozen grapes. And then I like to put frozen blueberries into overnight oatmeal so it's ready the next day. And frozen strawberries and the frozen blueberries are really great in smoothies. Right, potatoes can last up to 3 months in a cool, dry, ventilated area. Turnips up to 2 weeks. So again, we can plan these toward the end of our menu week. Carrots, 4 to 5 weeks. Celery roots, several weeks, loosely wrapped in plastic in the fridge. Winter squash on your counter can last up to 3 months if it's stored whole in a cool, dry, dark area, ventilated, and then rutabagas up to a month in an unsealed plastic bag in your fridge. So again, these items you can plan to have at the end of the week or the following week. Bell peppers, they also last a long time, up to 3 weeks in a sealed plastic bag in your fridge crisper. And then other produce. So again, the berries, we want to plan those in the beginning of the week when we go shopping. Same thing with broccoli and green beans. They'll last about 3 to 5 days in the fridge. Bagged salads, 3 to 5 days. I find arugula is a little hardier. It tends to last a little bit longer in the fridge. Melon, unripe, at room temperature a few days. When it's ripe in your fridge, 5 days. When it's cut, just about 3 days. Same thing with watermelon when it's cut, just about 3 days. Uncut, up to 2 weeks in your fridge. And then avocados at the top. So you can get several days on the counter, 4 to 7 days. When it's ripe, put them in the fridge, and then keep them up to 5 days. Other food that lasts long, honey, several years, canned beans, 2 to 3 years, vinegar, several years, white rice, 4 to 5 years, brown rice, 6 to 8 months, and then powdered milk, several years in a cool, dry place. So the oil that I showed you earlier, so again, within 2 years of the harvest date is great. Once you open it, 3 to 6 months, here's what I want you to consider. Next time you open up an olive oil for the first time or any oil, open it up and smell it and get to remember that smell, because this way you'll know when it's rancid, it's going to have a different kind of smell, and then you'll know when it's bad. And that for me, I use a lot of olive oil over, we tend to use that before it becomes, before the 6 months. But sometimes canola oil can hang around in my house. And I know that actually, that is getting kind of strong. So it's time for me to replace it, because I know when I first get it, the smell's more mild and now it's a little more stinky. So I know the difference. So we want you to know that difference so that you can toss that. The other thing is to keep a label. Write down when you open food so that you know when you opened it, and how many days out it'll be good for, such as hummus, for example. Often we'll say use, within 7 days. And then, you can write that date on there so you'll know when it's about time to throw that out. And this way you can also plan to use that up. And then unopened nuts so nut butters, natural nut butters, when you open them, keep them in the fridge. They'll last for about 2 to 3 months. Unopened, about 6 to 9 months in your pantry. And the almond butter, the best buy date, plus you can sometimes get about 6 months beyond that. And then bagged peanuts, 1 to 2 months in the pantry, 4 to 6 months in your fridge. And then jarred and canned nuts unopened for about 2 years. Whole grains intact for up to 6 months. Flours in your pantry, 1 to 3 months. In the freezer, 2 to 6 months. So I have bags of whole oat flour, buckwheat flour. I keep them in my freezer. I also keep my seeds that are ground, like the ground flax and ground hemp seeds. I keep those in the freezer too to get more life out of them. And I like to keep my nuts in the fridge to get longer life out of them. Okay, let's talk about the summer. When buying groceries or eating outside, refrigerate perishable food within 1 hour if it's 90 degrees or warmer, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. When grilling, you want to throw out marinades and sauces that have touched raw meat juices, which can spread germs to cooked foods. When marinating foods, keep them in the refrigerator, not on the counter. And use clean utensils and a clean plate to remove cooked meat from the grill. Don't eat raw oysters. They may contain harmful bacteria, even if they look, smell, and taste fine. Keep cold food in coolers at 40 degrees or less. Keep beverages in separate coolers than perishable foods. Limit opening coolers. And keep raw meats, poultry, and seafood and their juices separate from other foods that are ready to eat. And then cook food thoroughly using a thermometer to check the temperature. And at the end of the program, you'll see I have a temperature chart that can be very helpful. And then for cold foods, once you've served them, they should not sit out for longer than 2 hours, or 1 hour if the outdoor temperature is above 90 degrees. If it does, then we want to discard it. Foods like chicken salad and desserts in individual serving dishes can be placed directly on ice or in a shallow container set in a deep pan filled with ice. Then we want to drain off that water as the ice melts and replace the ice frequently. Hot foods should be kept hot at 140 degrees or more. We want to wrap it well and place it in an insulated container until serving. And then, just as with cold food, these foods should not sit out for more than 2 hours or 1 hour in temperatures above 90 degrees. If food is left out longer, throw it away to be safe. Okay, easy steps to minimize food waste. Treat your home like a business. And as I mentioned earlier, don't keep too much inventory on hand. You want to plan your menu. So if we're going to go shopping this weekend, let's say Sunday we're going shopping, on Saturday, we want to take the menu, and it's a blank menu, and look at what do we have on hand? What food do we need to use up that we have in the fridge, that we have in the pantry? This way, we get that food in rotation on the menu so that we use it up so it doesn't go bad and that we don't have to throw it away and create more food waste in the future. So take inventory, your freezer as well, of everything we need to use up. And then use a shopping list to check off items that you need to purchase. It really works well into a nice system. So when you make that menu of foods that you have on hand, then you add to the menu foods that you want to have this week, and then we add that to the shopping list. As I mentioned earlier, use a marker to indicate the date you opened or cooked a food, and then freeze food such as bread, and I mentioned, sliced fruit, meat, or leftovers that won't be eaten in time. And number 6, produce that's past its prime, as well as odds and ends of ingredients and leftovers, may still be fine for cooking. We can repurpose them into soups, casseroles, stir fries, frittatas, sauces, baked goods, pancakes, or smoothies. So this is the menu, the blank menu. So I'm going to send that along to your Point 32 health representative so you can have access to that. And then this is the customizable shopping list in Excel. So you can erase and add. You see the produce area on the left. There's a lot of food in that area because that's what we need to eat more of, your fruits and your veggies. And then again, you have the meat and seafood area, dairy, frozen foods, breads, canned and jarred foods, breakfast type of items, miscellaneous on the bottom. I even put an area for, like, if you go to special supermarkets once in a while, like us, we go to Trader Joe's once in a while. So again, you can customize this to work for you and your family. And now here is the temperature chart. So this is the minimal internal temperatures for various foods and leftovers, what to cook them to. So for example, leftovers should be cooked to 165, fish 145, poultry 165, and then pork, beef, veal, and lamb steaks, chops, and roast to 145, ground meat to 160. And then you'll have the handout for the other items. So I want to take your questions now. Thank you for being so patient, and let's go ahead and if you feel free to put comments in there, questions. So one question that came up, my husband works at a grocery store and they donate to a ton of their local pantries. Thank you for sharing. This is wonderful news, and we want to see that happening, and it's great to know that it is happening. And as I mentioned, I've seen it happen at food pantries as well, so it's great. So another question, getting back to don't wash pre-wash bagged vegetables like lettuce or um yeah, it definitely can't hurt, but you don't have to rinse those off. So what I would say, if you're going to rinse them, the bagged salads, don't rinse it all at once, because when you rinse that pre-washed salad, it's going to go bad faster if you put it back in the fridge. So pull out what you're going to need, what you're going to use, and then feel free, if you want to wash that, go ahead. It's the food that you want to be most careful with and not wash the protein food. So years ago, people would wash chicken and beef. You don't want to wash those because that bacteria can splash off. And thank you so much for commenting on the handouts. Yes. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you, Beth, for saying put flour, rice, pasta in plastic containers for storage. Yes, you want to store them tightly. If they don't come in a tightly sealed package, then, either put them in a sealed baggie or in a storage container can be very helpful. Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments? And I see another one coming in. Yeah, certainly composting. So that's what many people are doing now. So yes, definitely. Thank you for mentioning composting is great to do to help to prevent against food waste. Oh, thank you so much. And so Beth, thank you for sharing that. She puts fruit in glass jars in the refrigerator. One thing that I want to mention is that I make my own salad dressings, and I notice I get a little more life out of them. I keep them in a mason jar, tightly sealed. If I put them in a baggie and then seal that, I get a little more life. I get an extra day or 2 out of it. So just something to think about. So yeah, keeping things sealed can be very helpful. So thank you for sharing, Beth. Any other questions or comments? It was a lot of information in a short amount of time. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, everyone. Well, thank you so much on behalf of Harvard Pilgrim Point 32 Health and Tufts. We thank you so much for being here. Hope to see you again in the future. I'm Tricia Silverman. I'm a registered dietitian and a wellness and life coach. Thank you. Thank you. Love the comments. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the great questions. And thank you to Tara, my co pilot today. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.